is a trick of Shaytaan to make us feel bad and guilty, and so bad that we don't return to a good deed that we were once doing. Of course, the Qur'an was not revealed just for us to recite. Sometimes it took big tests in my life for me to return to the Qur'an. I think there are times when we realize and notice that we have drifted away from the Qur'an. And it's really important not to allow Shaytaan to come in at that point and tell you that, it's too late, or you should be ashamed of yourself, or whatever negative voices that you're hearing in your head that are preventing you from coming back to the Qur'an. Why do people drift away from the Qur'an? I think sometimes it's just that life takes over. And, there are periods in our lives, especially as women, when it's really hard to prioritize your own personal goals. For example, when you've just had a baby, you just got married, there's been big changes in your life in some way. It's really easy for your normal rhythm to just be kind of upset a little bit. Now, if you've become aware of that, I think it's important to just think about, what were the steps, or what are the things that have prevented you from engaging with the Book of Allah? Is it that you're over prioritizing the wrong things? Is it that you're just a very distracted person? Or are there ways that you could reincorporate a Qur'an habit into your life? And I would argue, yes, there are. Because you can always start with the smallest amount of time, or the smallest habit that you're able to incorporate back into your life. Let me give you some pointers and ideas for that. So, for example, there's this idea of habit stacking, right? Habit stacking is where you use a habit that you already have, that you've already got, sorted and established in your life, and you stack another habit on top of it, so that it's almost as though the already established habit is like a trigger for you to now do the other habit. Let me give you an example. We brush our teeth every morning, right? Hopefully. I'm hoping everyone does that. After you brush your teeth, you might have a certain routine that you follow. So brushing my teeth, getting changed, I have breakfast. These are already established habits. Now I'm going to stack on top of that habit of having coffee or having breakfast, my Qur'an time, right? That's just one example. Another example could be your Fajr prayer. Hopefully you're waking up for the Fajr prayer. Or maybe it's Dhuhr prayer. Choose a prayer that you're doing, obviously consistently, and just stack the habit of Qur'an onto that prayer. So you make it a rule that I'm not going to get up from my sajada, my prayer mat. I'm not going to get up until I've spent some time with the Qur'an. And then make it like the minimum length of time to start with. I know, when we think about doing a minute or 2 minutes of reading Qur'an, it seems like an embarrassment, right? Can't I give more time than that? But if at the moment you're doing 0 time with the Qur'an, or if the time you're spending is very little, then you've got to start somewhere to build that habit back up. So whenever I'm trying to reestablish a habit, I like to think, what is the minimum amount of time I'm willing to do that I will be able to do every single day without fail? And even if that's 2 minutes, I'll take it. When you're trying to reconnect with the Qur'an, one of the ways is to get back into listening. And here you can go into listen mode. You can decide which surah you'd like to listen to. So for me, I'd really like to listen to Surah Maryam. And then here you can choose any reciter you want. SubhanAllah, there's so many options. I think I'm going to go with Sudais. And then the speed. Now, play each verse once is fine for me. There we go. So I could keep that on in the background and I can listen to it on faster speed. So that's a great feature. Another way to start re-engaging with the Qur'an is tadabbur. Tadabbur means to reflect, to ponder and think about what we are reading. Of course, the Qur'an was not revealed just for us to recite, right? For it to go no further than our throats, as the scholars say. It was revealed as guidance for our lives. It should be a living, breathing book for us. And so perhaps you could take a part, a chapter, a verse even of the Qur'an, read it, read the translation, or if you know Arabic or if you're learning Arabic, you could try to understand the verse directly and then do a little bit of journaling, just a page. Reflect on that verse. Why was that verse revealed? What was the context? How could you apply the learnings or the message of that verse in your life? And if you just spend a little bit of time journaling every single day, you'll see your connection and love for the Quran increase every day, and you will notice the relevance that it has to the problems that you're facing. Another way to re-establish your relationship with the Quran could be through listening to the Quran. Alhamdulillah, one of the great things about the technology we have today is that we have every qari in the world in our pockets, right? We could listen to the Quran being recited, any surah, anytime, on demand, right? So there's really no excuse. Maybe one of the ways you could reestablish your relationship with the Quran is that when you're doing some everyday task, for example, you're ironing or you're cooking, or like as I like to do, I go walking every day. Something that you're doing that is kind of repetitive and that doesn't require your focus, you could have the Quran playing in the background or in your ears, in your headphones, and make it a habit. So for example, every Jummah, I'm going to listen to the entire Surah Kahf, while I'm doing something. Just as a way to reduce the friction for you getting back into some kind of habit of re-engaging with the Quran. I know it can be really hard to re-engage with the Quran if you are feeling guilty about it and you're feeling that you have disengaged, especially when you're somebody who used to engage with it in the past. I actually know how that feels, because when I had my baby son, just before that, I was actually memorizing Surah Baqarah. And I remember when he was born, I really couldn't keep up my memorization, or at least I didn't feel I could at that time. And it kind of threw me off. And so that momentum that I had gathered over the years just before he was born was pretty much lost. However, it is a trick of Shaytaan to make us feel bad and guilty, and so bad that we don't return to a good deed that we were once doing. It's okay if you're not able to return to it in the amount and with the energy that you used to have. That's okay, because your reality might have changed, right? Your life happens and things happen and, stuff changes. However, I think if we all realize that this book is the book of Allah, it is a shifa, it is the healing that each one of us yearns for, then inshallah we can make the effort to begin to re-engage. I know that sometimes it took big tests in my life, disappointments, people letting me down, and things that really could have caused me to fall into a type of depression, for me to return to the Quran. And when I did so, what I realized was it was exactly the medicine that I had been looking for. The words of the Quran, especially when you understand them, you realize they are the balm that we need for the problems and the tests that inevitably we face in life. So no matter how far you've drifted from the Quran, never think it's too late. It's never too late. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made the Quran available to you anywhere, in any place, in any time of your life. And you'll see that if you return to the Quran, there may be surahs and verses that you used to read years ago that now have a new resonance for you. Of course, reciting the Quran in and of itself is highly rewarded. Every single letter that we recite will be rewarded. But if you're trying to re-engage with the Quran and maybe it's been some time, then it's worth reading Quran along with a translation, or listening to some kind of lecture that allows you to listen to the Quran as well as understand the meaning. One of the things that really helped me to re-engage with the Quran has been having a tutor, actually. Because people, for example, when they want to get back into exercise, what do? They get a personal trainer, and that personal trainer has an appointment with them every week. And so they're much more likely to make that appointment and get back into an exercise habit. In a similar way, when you have a tutor, either online or, in person, or a class that that you're going to commit to and that you've paid for, you're willing to attend, then what that does is it gives you that weekly, at least, appointment that you're going to keep. So personally, I found having a tutor to get back into the habit of Quran very, very useful. Alternatively, setting a time daily for Quran, just as you would set a time for any other commitment, and really protecting that block and protecting that time is another way that you can reestablish your relationship with Quran. And it doesn't have to be for a whole hour or something like this. You can start off with 10 minutes, and just make that your me time. That's your time for your relationship with the Book of Allah. I think as women, we're quite notorious for feeling guilty even about prioritizing some of our own personal goals. But this is a goal, engaging with the Quran is a goal that will make you an even better mother, wife, or whatever other things that you're doing in your life. So it's actually worth talking to your family members and saying to them, listen, I've got this Quran time every single day, and I really want to prioritize and protect it. So please, can you help me to be able to do that? So that you and your family as a whole are enrolled into your vision for Quran. If you benefited from that video, do subscribe to Tarteel's YouTube channel and leave a comment below.